Hey there. I really enjoyed your film, and correct me if I'm wrong, but did you say which is your favorite film in the franchise?
Child's Play 2.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. There's a lot of information in this film, and seeing you grow up with Chucky was very heartwarming. It's a heartwarming side to it, like to a character, often feared by children. Is this like is this kind of what you were wanting the viewers to experience, this heartwarming side of this character?
Absolutely. It's almost like I wanted them to feel the same sentiments that I do towards this doll, that it's not anything we have to be afraid of. And even if you were afraid of it or traumatized by it as a kid, like I was, there's so much warmth at the heart of what goes into making the movies that hopefully you can find appreciation for it, even if it terrified you.
Awesome. Yeah. Growing up, Chucky, Puppet Master, those things definitely scared me growing up. Your dad has worked on numerous properties, and you've been around all of it. When commenting on growing up within that world, were you always set on using Chucky as that vehicle to tell that story?
No, this is something that just fell into place through film school. When I was attending Florida State, we had a documentary semester, and I wasn't even interested in directing documentaries at the time. That was definitely not my genre of choice. I wanted to go straight into narrative, horror, or fantasy, or horror comedy. And it was through telling the short version of this story, which is around 7 minutes, that I was like, oh my God, this has to be longer. This franchise deserves so much more than that. And yeah, it was kind of like a vice or a device to tell that side of like my childhood, but with something very specific that a lot of people could relate to in a way.
Is that the 7 minute piece? Is that the one that's a special feature on Cult, right?
Yes, yeah, that's
Awesome.
my film school film.
Awesome. That's really cool. That's quite the accomplishment. Speaking of this film though, I liked the VHS and DVD transitions. I thought that was really cool. My wife wanted me to tell you that the nails looked really good in all of those scenes.
Yay! Oh, thank you for me. I'm glad you noticed. It was very specific. It was I did all those scenes in like one day. So I was like ripping acrylics off of my fingers and then gluing other ones on. So I'm glad it didn't go unnoticed.
Yeah, we loved it, and I like obviously big VHS fan here, but I just thought it was a cool, interesting idea. Like, was there anything that sparked that, or was it just spur of the moment?
Yes, actually, I over COVID, because I filmed those segments in my parents' basement over COVID. But I'm really into true crime, as I'm sure a lot of horror
Yeah.
fans are as well. I had watched the Ted Bundy tapes like 13 times. It's an unhealthy amount, but it was because the editing was so good, and their title sequence in that show, they use a tape recorder and all these different things that make it just so much more impactful. And it also tells you the time, because
Yeah.
obviously I'm of a younger generation, and Ted Bundy was not really during my time on this earth, but it puts you back into that headspace. And so I was like, I need something to tell us where we're at in time. And that's a visual breather, that's not a talking head. So the Ted Bundy tapes inspired that idea for some reason.
That's pretty cool. That's a nice insight. And you mentioned COVID. So with this project in mind, did a lot of the editing was it handled by you, I'm assuming.
Yes.
And when you had that initial run through, how long was the initial like first draft?
Like 3 hours.
Yeah, I imagine so, because you get like so invested into these projects, and there's so much valuable information.
Yeah.
Were there any memorable pieces or interviews that you had to cut, due to time constraints?
Yeah. Gosh, some of it's in the bonus features. There was a segment about how everybody, not everybody, but several people in the Chucky family celebrate Halloween to the nines. and almost like a religion. I thought that was an interesting facet of our family speaking, because we're already a bit weird and unconventional in our childhoods of Chucky, but also Halloween specifically for all of us is so important. And then Chucky's usually involved somehow between all of us, because Brad and Fiona had their doll. My family obviously has our dolls. David Kirshner has his own doll. So it's like really weird how we all celebrate Halloween, but Chucky's also there in the same capacity, because I can't walk outside and ask anybody else the same question. It's specifically these people. So that was cut due to it kind of just being, we were kind of wrapping up the documentary, and it's like a 8-minute little thing about it. And it was just too much of a segue to come back from. And then I would have loved to dive more into like Brad and Fiona's relationship personally, like their relationship together. But it's a bit different because Brad's career in his sense is an actor and not specifically just Chucky. And I think a lot of people wanted me to go deeper into Brad and Fiona's relationship with this franchise, but it doesn't go as deep as my dad and I's per se, because Brad comes in to do ADR and it's less of a time commitment. Depending on the it's still time consuming, but it's not as all consuming as it is for the puppeteers. So it's not, diving in that would be having to dive into what it was like for her to have an actor as a dad, which is equally as interesting. And I loved so many stories that they told, but it also kind of like I had that in the rough cut, and it was just like the deeper we dove into that, it was harder to come back to Chucky. So I wish I could have explored that more, but it just didn't make sense.
I totally understand, kind of looking around online, that seems to be one of the weirder or like more common criticisms, is that there is these like interviews that don't really matter. And do you have a comment for the people that maybe don't appreciate Marlon Wayans as much as I do?
Yeah, it's interesting. I hear, I see comments where people are like, these are just random ass interviews. And it's like, well, if you pay attention and if you're in the genre, Marlon Wayans has spoofed every horror movie 10 Ways Till Sunday. And I was given advice to get outside perspective from bigger names in the industry. And I just did this on my own. Like I did not have agents or people involved when I went to make it. So it was honestly like, who can I get that makes sense in some capacity, that I have access to, that knows I have no money. And Abigail Breslin is a good friend of mine, but it also makes sense. She's in Scream Queens. What do you mean the actress from Scream Queens isn't like a viable option to talk about horror movies? Of course. And she's a Chucky fan. That's also what I wanted, was people who knew the genre and appreciated it. And of course, Lynn Shay makes the absolute sense, but also Dan Povenmire is like, I wanted to get a voice actor that was more well-known, who could chime in on the voice acting part of it. And the access that I had was Dan Povenmire. So I'm going to, of course, interview Dan Povenmire. You wouldn't not interview Dan Povenmire.
That's correct. I have interviewed Lynn Shay before, and it was a fantastic time. I would do it again. But with her, I really appreciated the transition from Freddy to Chucky, and I thought that was a really cool piece and kind of a neat way to get maybe the horror fans that weren't really invested in the beginning to get to grab them. So I really appreciated that.
Oh, thank you.
So I also saw you did a little work on a Hocus Pocus project, and I was curious if we would get a similar, deconstruction, with that film.
I hadn't even thought about that. I very much could. It's a little less personal because I wasn't, Hocus Pocus was 97, I think, the first one. Yeah. So I was 1. But that is something that's been at the core of my dad's career as well, that now just got its own sequel. So that's a great idea. I hadn't thought about it, but I love both of those movies. Doug Jones is an amazing human being, and obviously David Kirshner is worked on both. So that would be interesting as well. And all the actors from that film I've heard are amazing. And
Yeah.
I'm actually friends with Jason, who is the voice of Thackeray.
Well, there you go.
Man, you're just setting it up. I'll have to come back and like credit you.
Let's see. And what to wrap up, what's next for you? We just talked about the Hocus Pocus documentary, but can fans look forward to a full-fledged Phoebe film? Because I think it's time. I think it's time.
The fact that you've seen that. I would love to do more with Phoebe. She still exists. She's on a shelf. And Kibby Robertson, who plays her voice, is so wonderful to work with. I would love to do a feature film. I think I would just need to write it is the problem.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be opposed to that. I got swept up in the documenting and directing a making of the Foo Fighters movie Studio 666 that came out this time last year. So that consumed a lot of my time, and I hope that is put into a documentary at some point, and fans can look forward to seeing that. For right now, I'm in the music video space, and I actually just worked on a music video with Lachlan Watson from the Chucky TV series.
Wow.
They're amazing. It was awesome. And then I hope to get back into horror, but I would not be opposed to a Phoebe feature film.
Yeah, I actually saw Studio 666 this time last year. I went and saw it on my birthday. So congratulations for being part of that. It looked like a lot of fun. But here at CineDump, we let the doers know how they're doing, and you're doing a lot. You're doing just fine. Thank you so much for your time. I will keep track of your career. I look forward to what comes next. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's so kind.
That's all I got. Thank you.